What's up, folks? This is Addy Ads. This is the Public Intel Report, and we have Adam Fitzgerald on the show today, who I've spoken to in the past, but not recently. So we're going to get some updates on what Adam's been up to. He's a writer, journalist, and geopolitical researcher, as well as the host of the Darkened Hour podcast, who covers a variety of topics, including the U.S. Israeli-Saudi relationship, the BCCI bank, the events of September 11th, 2001, intelligence agencies, and more. And we're going to get his recent videos that he's done, his take and further analysis on that, as well as some current events and whatever else he's been up to. So thanks for coming on the show again, Adam, and for being flexible. I really appreciate it, sir.
No problem for you, man. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course, of course. And I've noticed you've been, and perhaps you could talk about how your videos have evolved over the past year or so since we've spoken last. But yeah, what's been on your mind recently, Adam? Because you kind of take a more of a historical perspective on things rather than current events, although you do both.
I try anyway. I try to be up to date, but there's so much going on the last couple of months, so it's hard to keep up. But usually, yes, you're correct. I usually tend to stick with past historical events. Anything relating to of course, the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. So there's a lot of history regarding leading up to it, but a hell of a lot more coming out of it, and that's actually just the answer to September 11, 2001. The historical answer is the pretext. The pretext is 9/11, and what comes after it is much more important. Of course, it encapsulates so much. And what we have seen in the last year since I last came on has been nothing short of horrifying, but extraordinarily horrifying. And there is no end in sight. It's basically a lot of 9/11. What came after it is a ripple effect. And there is no, I don't think there is, not to sound, depressing, but I don't see any type of light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. Not with the way people are now. I think a lot of people have become much more polarized than they were 20 years ago. And with the amount of disinformation, especially on viral media, it has helped to put the majority of the people in a state of paralysis, so to speak.
Okay, okay, sure. And perhaps that is manifested in the fact that people don't vote really. I think we're at lower than 50% of voting participation, for example. But since I just was watching this video, I saw, and I just was hanging out with Clint actually this week
Hmm.
in DC. He appeared on Tim Pool's show. I think he was on his show again yesterday. Um, but he mentioned Pasobik and how he speaks about China and the right, generally speaking, when the right kind of points out how the left talks about Ukraine, right? And I'm kind of paraphrasing what happened here, but do you want to talk about that a little bit, that whole instance? Because I missed that. I still haven't seen the entire Tim Cass interview, Reed's or Clint's yet.
Yeah, it was a Tim Pool show, Tim Cast. Actually, I'm not, I don't follow Tim Pool, so I don't know much about him. I just know that he will gossip more than talk about the current events itself. And so, not to degrade anything about Tim Pool, but Clint Russell, who runs Liberty Lockdown podcast, basically went on and mentioned Jack Posobik's name less than a second, just as a mere mention of the hypocrisy of the political paradigm of this country regarding, like you said, the left, regarding Ukraine, and of course the conservatives of the right who endorse two wars, China and Iran. And this caused quite a stir online. In fact, Jack Posobiec's own on Twitter basically responded by ad hominem attacks on Clint Russell. In fact, he did it 3 times, and actually, in response, Clint did the right thing and basically wrote out a very detailed response regarding Jack Posobiec and why he thinks Jack Posobiec is no better than anybody from the left mouthing points on CNN or CBS News that endorses this conflict in Ukraine. And it's not black and white. No war is ever black and white. There's a lot of gray in the middle. And what happens is that Jack Posobiec basically went, a rung lower, if that was even possible, and basically continued his ad hominem attacks on Clint Russell. And Clint did the right thing; he blocked him, and then basically ended the conversation. So I like to play peacemaker, and I don't like antagonists themselves. And so what I found was I wanted to do a video regarding Clint's position as the best I can, and basically talk about Jack Posobiec's own maladies over the past couple of years, what he's about, because he won't say it to the public. And he has a lot of inconsistencies regarding what he endorses as truth or information. And what I'm trying to get at is that Jack Posobiec's not alone. And you will get the Jack Posobiec's of the left, like Don Lemon or Keith Olbermann, who basically bullhorn these talking points. And just to make something very clear, and something very important, um, there's only a left and right paradigm when it comes to domestic issues. But when it comes to more global issues,
Mm,
really important issues, such as foreign lobbyists appeasing foreign lobbyists, when it comes to war, when it comes to the benefactors of the military industrial complex, the fossil fuel, and all these major corporations, well, there is no right and left. There's only the state. And that's right. The only thing that drives the state is power, dominion, and money. And these are all the things that are lacking in the public sphere regarding the middle and lower classes. And so when the left endorses the Ukraine war, and you'll get a lot of these people from the right who are trying to co-opt the libertarian message. And that's my worry is that libertarians who are basically isolated from the political divisive sphere is going to get dragged into this this back and forth left and right thing in the public's eye. And I think that's what's happening is that the conservatives like Tucker Carlson and not so much Jack Posobiec, but Glenn Beck is another who basically latch on to the libertarian message because they dare speak out against Ukraine. But when the Republicans come to office, and they will in 2024, and that's my prediction, is that they're going to win the presidency, is that you're going to see a switch, and that the Ukraine war will not get the money that we've been seeing, which is now 12 billion. All that money will now be diverted to probably Taiwan, and of course
mm.
to what I think the realistic war will be Iran, and that will be a disaster. To say it happen, but I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah. So you think it's most likely we will divert all that money in 2024 to a war, another war in the Middle East, this time with the Iranians.
Yeah, well, right now, as I think Biden, before he went on his like 300th vacation, he actually was asked by the media in an interview about spending money to Taiwan, and if it happens that China basically invades airspace militarily, he basically said that they would interfere and militarily intervene. So that leads me to believe right then and there that the United States are basically will engage in a military conflict with China, which um, I don't see as a. I don't think it's feasible. I don't think that will be an all-out war because, for one, China has the largest military on earth regarding manpower. But we're far and away beyond the days of land invasion. We are now in a technological age when it comes to drone strikes using air surface missiles from the Navy. And so, what will happen is basically we'll attack the country that doesn't have the necessary capable means of defending themselves, and that would be Iran. China can, Russia certainly can. They could destroy the whole world in process with it, but they're both nuclear capable countries. Iran is not, and the United States only picks on non-nuclear traditional countries.
Okay, okay, I gotcha. Wow, that's amazing. What about the Libertarian Party? Since we discussed them, is there any chance they could make any headway in 2024 in a serious way?
Well, no, and not to rail on the libertarian, they don't have the money to do so. So for one, I wish they can focus more on a unifying message. And I've said this before many times before that a lot of libertarians are very divided when it comes to domestic issues, and you're seeing it in viral media. You yourself have seen it for yourself. But in terms of anti-war, you could get so many people on board. Not only that, you could probably get the fence sitters of the left and right on board as well. And so that's the one unifying message that Ron Paul of the founder of the libertarian movement, of the current libertarian movement, basically ran on and basically won a lot of people over in the early 2000s. And a lot of people agreed because we had the Iraq War, which a lot of people disagreed with, and that was the largest protest that we had in history since the Vietnam War. And we haven't had a protest like that ever since. They've been um, defragmented. I think the only thing that came close, remotely close, was the Occupy Wall Street movement. But ever since then, a lot of these movements are basically compromised by the FBI or state and local law enforcements that act as protesters, and they spread rumors and gossip and destroy the movements from within. So
Right.
what the libertarian movement I think needs to do is basically you know put the domestic issues aside for now and basically run on the precepts of anti-war. And they just
Mm,
had a huge rally
yeah.
at Washington D.C. 3,000, I think 3,000, 5,000 people. I don't know the exact number, but I was very impressed. I said that's a great start. I think you were there for that yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I was. Yeah, I thought it was great turnout, and I learned compared to last year's Defeat the Mandates rally, also in
Mm.
DC in January, the budget was just a fraction of what that budget was. So per capita turnout was much better for this or per dollar turnout, let's say, for this
Yeah,
rally.
that's a, hey, listen, we always start out small and then you just try to get bigger. And so hopefully in time, they could get to like 10,000 maybe next year or maybe 15,000. But as long as they get the big speakers that they got, they got Scott Orton, Tulsi Gabbard, Jimmy Dore was there, um, uh, a lot of other people that were there, and a lot of big speakers that were talking about anti-war. Now, of course, there's a part of the libertarian community that basically said, well, there are pro-Russian separatist individuals there. Needless to say, even if they were, the message was quite clear. There was anti-war message, which you should get behind, right? No matter what people say about Tulsi Gabbard, that was one example. A lot of people say, "Oh, she's a war hawk. She endorses the war with Ukraine, on the Russian side or whatever." For those who are basically critical of Tulsi Gabbard, I think that's a mistake. I wouldn't say you're wrong, but I think it's a mistake. I think the look at the bigger picture, and the bigger picture would be to basically stop, the funding of all these wars and criticize the countries that are behind it. And if you're just going to blame Russia, or if you're just going to blame Ukraine, well, you're doing the wrong thing. Everyone that's involved in that conflict is to blame. And the only innocent people are, of course, like in every war, civilians. And they're the ones who are going to suffer the most. There's a very, nefarious, dark saying online that I saw recently that the United States are willing to defend against Russia down to the last Ukrainian. And that's exactly what's going to happen is that the Ukrainians are basically going to get liquidated. And then, soon enough, we'll lose interest, just like we do with other wars. And there'll be new incidents and events to basically garner our attention and our funding. But I mean, 12 billion, I think, approximately right now, according to Dave DeCamp of antiwar.com, basically reports that we're up to about 12 or about $13 billion, an enormous amount of money for a very fractured country that has a lot of intelligence, black operations that go all the way back. I actually did two podcast episodes with Richard Cox, the co-host of the Darkened Hour, and we talked about the CIA involvement regarding ultra right wing separatists in the Balkans, in Ukraine, that we talked about certain individuals, and one of them was Mykola Lebed, who basically was involved with the liquidation of Jewish Polish Jews in the Second World War, and the CIA actually used him as a conduit to basically spy on Russian conscripts in the region, and became a huge spy master. In fact, so big, so influential was Mykola Lebed that the United States gave him house residency here in the United States. I think it was in Detroit, no less. Knowing that here's a guy who basically helped in the involvement of liquidation of Polish Jews, and that didn't stop them. But that's what the CIA basically involves himself with. He's a perfect example. We saw this in Central America in the 1980s with the Sandinistas and the Contras. So there's a lot of history, dark history involving the CIA and a lot of these ultra right wing nationalists, and of course, ultra right wing religious jihadists that we saw in Afghanistan during the invasion by the Soviet Union in 1980. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
see what I mean about nothing is black and white. There's a lot of gray. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what I'm getting to.
Definitely. And what I wanted to switch topics if we could. The
Please.
Project Veritas coup. Just wanted to bring it up to see if you had any thoughts on it, and see if you've been paying attention to what's been going on there.
Project Veritas.
Yeah. So this.
Yeah, James O'Keefe just
Yep.
got released and whatnot. Here's
Yep.
one thing about is I'll compare it this way. Project Veritas is no better than, say, the Lincoln Project, which is another leftist media type of organization similar to Project Veritas. One thing they both have in common, they won't tell the whole truth. Now, they'll sprinkle some facts with fiction, but it's what the facts that people are drawn to. Now, if you're politically imbued with, say, the Democrat or Republican Party, you're only going to listen to pundits that agree with your worldview. You're never going to get a broader general picture. Now, I don't vote and I don't believe, I don't adhere to any divisive human constructs like religion or politics or racism or sexism. I think it's all based on the division of humankind. But one thing I can say is that there's a lot of people who are basically very ignorant regarding what's going on in the world. And the only thing that they get their information from is the general media. Now, a lot of these people are basically, they don't vote. Like, we agreed about the non voting public in this country. It is a huge percentage. But nevertheless, they're not very well informed regarding alt media, true alt media that doesn't have a bias, so to speak. So they'll go and watch either CNN or Fox, but not really invest in it. And then on the other hand, you get this small minority problem about these people who are basically very infused with their political parties and basically will become advocates and pundits online. And what they'll do is spread this message, and the message itself is incomplete. And that's not all of it's false. Basically, like I said, they'll sprinkle some facts with the fiction itself, but you won't know what it is if you don't do your due diligence and basically research that that you give it the time that it needs to basically research the stuff that isn't true. So a lot of these people are just going to take it as is and say, yeah, that's true about this person or that's true about this community and whatnot. And what happened with Project Veritas is something that I'm not going to say I miss them. I'm glad what happened to them, but they're no better than, say, the Lincoln Project, or like I said, with Don Lemon, CNN, or anybody else from MSNBC for that matter. Um, One thing is for certain is that this is going to create fanatics from both sides, and that is something that I think is going to be a bigger problem in the future, because a lot of people see this as they see it's the state basically getting rid of James O'Keefe. Well, no, James O'Keefe's problem was that whatever happened at the workplace was that the complaints were he was, very high strung, very demanding, and very critical of his own staff. And I don't think, is that really the truth? I don't know. I wasn't there inside, those meetings and the workplace itself. But I can say what got him into trouble was basically there was a lot of people from the left who put a lot of pressure on Project Veritas, basically talking about the false things that he basically propagates, but they won't dare critique the stuff that he got right. Now, does this mean that James O'Keefe deserves what he gets? I won't feel sorry for him, But if he was actually an honest journalist and somebody who basically just reported the facts, then I would be on his side. But I'm not going to basically, you know, feel sorry for him.
I was I for one was very shocked when I learned what their budget was and the fact that he made I think it was just under $400,000 last on the last tax form. I
Whoa.
mean over $22 million I think annually was their last tax budget, which to me I mean that's not independent journalism.
Well, no, independent journalists like yourself will basically be broke, and that's why I don't make much money myself. I don't ask for money itself. I don't do films and do like live journalism like you. But for like yourself and others out there, you're basically going to scrape the barrel, and that's only because you aren't adhering to corporations or sponsors that basically tell you to spread only a certain message. Hey, maybe you should back down from this issue or whatnot. And that's why people like you I'll support, but people like James O'Keefe I won't. It's a shame because we should have more people such as yourself and let people like Abby and Robbie Martin and others read Coverdale. I like, and but they'll never get the attention they sorely deserve.
Do you think it is ever going to be possible to make money supporting oneself, telling the truth again? Because I guess it was possible at a few years ago.
We're far beyond that date now. I would say if this was approximately 40 years ago, maybe. But as soon as the media became corporatized and became fragmented, and as soon as everything on viral media became corporatized and fragmented, your windows of opportunity to become a voice in the wilderness really became smaller and smaller. Now, not to say that it's going to be impossible and that in the future, that voice will be obsolete. I think what I'm hoping for, and this is going to require a little bit of faith for this atheist anyway, but I think the faith would be that more people follow in the footsteps, such as yourself, and that people will begin to open up their own channels and report on just the facts. Now, will they reach the mega audience that we need to reach? Well, that's time will tell. And not to sound like a depressing pessimist, which I am. But I don't think we don't have the time to reach that message, to reach that bigger audience and whatnot, because of the simple fact that we don't have enough independent media and we don't have a bigger audience for them to have. But you got
Okay.
to try. The effort.
Uh-huh.
Look, I'm not telling you to go out there and basically, say heck with it and just drink yourself to death, right? I would listen. If you have, you have a future. You're young, and you may have kids in the future. May have. I would tell you that you could basically look at your children in the face or your loved ones in the face and say, "Hey, at least I tried." And that's all that means. And that's you can actually go to your deathbed, knowing full well that you gave the effort. And you know what? The effort is worth the fight. That's what I think.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Even though it's pretty tough, and I mean, it's so hard to predict because it's always a field that is evolving. I think constantly, and even as we kind of alluded to a couple of years ago, there were people who were making easily, enough to support themselves. But that period seems to have passed with people's Patreons going and whatnot. But again, it's impossible to predict the future. Um, but I wanted to ask you about what has been going on this year with these spy balloons, these train derailments. I was just in Ohio and East Palestine, for example. Is this a big deal? Is this relevant, or is this not even on your radar? Because you're doing your deep dives.
Um, these issues haven't really caught my attention to the extent of like the issues that I constantly talk about, but I have been paying attention, and I think I did a video regarding the Chinese spy balloon, and I thought that was such a non-story, only because of the laughable alternative is that look what the United States basically does all around the world. I mean, we have what we call the Five Eyes conglomerate, and for those who don't know anything about the Five Eyes, they're the major intelligence services regarding signals intelligence. the NSA, I think Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Great Britain. And their intelligence agencies are infused as one. And it's no longer five countries, it's over, I think, 45 countries now, all acting as a singular unit, sharing data on citizens with one another. And if a Chinese, if a Chinese spy balloon has basically caught your attention and saying, well, maybe we should invade China because they're invading our airspace, well, you have to ask yourself the question, why aren't we doing anything about it when we are doing that to everybody on the face of the earth, and especially within the citizens of this own country? I've covered quite a bit regarding the NSA's abuses of their civil liberties. In fact, I just did a video today, which you commented on. I thank you for it. Basically, talking about Obama and about the crimes that he's
Mm,
done. The signals intelligence invasion of privacy expanded under him. So, as for that story, I think that's basically laughable to the effect that you'll basically go to invade the country that basically put some weather balloon or maybe a spy device using these Cold War methods that are outdated 70 years ago. They don't need to do that. You have a phone. You're on the internet. Your privacy is already invaded. They already know
right.
much about us, and we know a hell of a lot more about them. As for the train derailment in, I forgot the name of the town. What was the name of the town again?
East Palestine,
Thank you,
Ohio.
East
Yep.
Palestine. I've not really extensively read much about into it. I know what happened there, and you basically are the best reporter on that story. You were there, and you're interviewing the people that were there, so you're going to definitely know more about that than me. So
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. I was just curious, because like I said, you do kind of do those longer investigative, pieces and stories. But yeah, what about our, the status of our, like, for example, the FBI right now, because the January 6th narrative seems to continue to collapse, and even the lab leak narrative too is coming back as being corroborated, or at least partially credible, in the sense that it, this virus was not zoonotic, right? So yeah, or any other stories that have caught your mind, wherever you want to take it, Adam.
no, let's do talk about that. I think those are very big covered events. As for COVID itself, my God, uh, the one incident that basically shadowed 9/11 all to itself. COVID itself, were we told the truth? Of course not. We're never told the actual truth about anything. But was it all a lie? Not really. The virus really did exist. Is it a bioweapon lab? Is it an agent that was manipulated? Was COVID itself, the family of COVID, SARS-CoV-2, basically manipulated in a lab somewhere in China with U.S. interest involved? That's a speculatory um, idea. It's something that's not irrational. One thing I like to do is that I like to basically um, talk about speculation in two narratives. One is rational speculation, the other is irrational. And most speculation is basically irrational. This is how disinformation works. And usually, when you have a lot of these online celebrities, like Alex Jones, for example, they'll tell you two things are right, but 98% of the stuff, they basically just, speculate or get wrong. That's how the legacy media works, right? So, in other words, Alex Jones will be seen as, oh, this old media individual with a big platform. He's basically, not part of the media. Well, no, he's not part of the media, so to speak, but he basically does the work of what the state would do when it has, the fifth column, which is the media, on their payroll. So when it comes to COVID, I would like to sum it up just like this. COVID is basically just like 9/11. We weren't told everything about it that was true, but not everything about it was false. Just like the 9/11 Commission report. Not everything was true about it, but not everything was false. It was incomplete. COVID itself, the story is incomplete. Even to now, the story is incomplete. And yeah, you'll get stories that come out and say, I think it was the New York Times that came out with it. And don't quote me on the publication, but came out and says that the mask mandates were wrong. How did we get it wrong? And I'm like, by God's sakes, I live in New York. I'm up here in Lower Westchester, And I haven't worn a mask in like a year. Now at my job, basically they had the screen shield. We didn't have to wear the mask, even though it was encouraged. We weren't pressured into it. My coworker wore a mask. She was more careful, more than me. I'm a little bit more irresponsible in that matter. I just wanted to prove a point, even though I could have gotten sick by doing it. But I wanted to prove a point. Luckily, I got COVID once. It wasn't on the job. It was actually 2 years ago. Um, wasn't severe, but I had severe body aches. I knew something was wrong, and I knew it wasn't just a regular cold. Other people that I knew personally severely got COVID bad. One passed away. So basically, it affected everybody much different. But if you had um, say asthma or if you had diabetes, you had a an affliction of sort that basically could have worsened the symptoms, you were much more inclined to have a severe case of COVID. But if you were healthy enough, and thankfully I was, yeah, your symptoms are a little bit less extreme. As for the vaccine, I got lucky. I didn't have to get it. I'm not against the vaccine, however. Um, but did were we lied to about the vaccine? Because at first, when the vaccines rolled out, we were told straight from the president and to his attorney general, right on down to the media, basically saying that if you got the shot, you didn't get COVID. Rachel Maddow, for God's sakes, basically said that word for word, verbatim, saying that if you got the shot, you wouldn't get COVID. Well, Biden said that too. Later on, they basically reorganized the message and said if you got the shot, you would have lesser symptoms with COVID. And all of a sudden now you need more shots. You needed a booster, and then they rolled out 5 shots. And what this told me was that the vaccine itself basically was weakened to the point where you had to get more and more of these shots to basically lessen the symptoms of COVID. But basically COVID, if you're young enough, basically you could actually survive and you wouldn't get the severe reaction that the media and the government basically told you that you would get. So that's what I'm saying about and not everything's black and white. It goes back to that message I said before. Not everything's black and white. Everything is gray. And as soon as people start looking into the gray area, we could probably get far ahead than we are right now.
Yeah, yeah,
And also,
yeah,
by the way, I'm sorry, you mentioned January 6th.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this is something. Let me talk about this for an example because this actually links to 9/11, and I'll tell you why. In November of 2001, the Bush administration, led by Dick Cheney, the vice president, rolled out a memorandum. The memorandum was to alleviate the Department of Justice regarding how to label terrorists, enemy combatants. They reformatted the term called enemy combatants. Usually that's the job of the Department of Justice, the FBI. They see a domestic issue and the guy is basically involved with a foreign terrorist organization. Yeah, you can make that link. He's a terrorist. Well, fast forward to 2020, 20 years later, 19 years later. So basically, what happened is a lot of those people that basically went to, riot, whatever, and that's not a coup. I mean, that's if that's a coup. Let me show you what the CIA does in Central America in 1980s. That's a coup. Let me show you what they did to Syria in 2011. That's an attempted coup. Look what they did to Libya. That's a coup. That's a coup. Not these ragtag bunch of Alex Jones individuals with these, insane looking dress wear. They're not a threat to nobody. They don't even got the military weaponry to take over the government. And yeah, by the way, I actually, and I'm going to sound pretty far reaching here, but I actually endorse like the threat to the government. And what I'm saying is we have to keep them honest. Now, I'm not saying go there and kill them and basically hijack them and threaten their lives, but we have to make sure that the enough of the people say when they commit a crime on their own accord in our name, we have to hold them accountable. Nobody else is going to, and they certainly won't. But what these people did, they basically went on the mere presence that the election was stolen. Duh. Every election is basically manipulated at some point. I mean, look what we do to other countries. Look, you don't think we do it here where it counts? So this whole idea of like the election was stolen for a guy who basically wouldn't care about your life, and he didn't, Donald Trump. basically let these people languish. But what the federal government did, when I'm trying to make my point, is they basically labeled these people enemy combatants. So, in other words, the laws that they wrote 20 years ago, 19 years ago, weren't made for Arab fundamentalists, so to speak. They were made for people like you and me, people in the future who are a threat to the state. One day will basically say, well, it's no longer the job of the Department of Justice, it's now the job of the president. Because when Vice President Dick Cheney wrote in that memorandum was that the job of labeling an enemy combatant no longer belongs to the Department of Justice, it now belongs to the President of the United States. And as you can see, the consolidation of power. And the very
Mm,
people who basically went to complain with Dick Cheney was, of course, the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, and, of course, the Secretary of State, Colin Powell, and the National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, because they were left out of the loop. And if there's going to be any memorandum that involves the president, well, they have to be involved, but they weren't. And there was a reason why, because they would have went against it, and rightfully so. So now you have the president of the United States who basically calls people enemy combatants. Well, when did January 6th happen? Well, it happened under the watch of the president of the United States, who labeled these people enemy combatants. And now they're languishing in jail and given these very exorbitant sentences. And guess who's cheering it on? The American people from the left, not realizing that one day they too will be called enemy combatants. Because heaven forbid, if a Republican president gets involved and becomes the next president, maybe not in 2024, but maybe in the future, and they start labeling Democrats as enemy combatants, those people who supported those people on January 6th to be in jail for those couple of years will now look back and say, why is this happening to me? And not looking at the bigger picture and state compliance when it comes to an egregious invasive of power regarding what they see as powers belonging to them over you and me, the common people, because we are the last enemy on the face of the earth. We've destroyed just about every country not named Russia or China or North Korea. The world powers, the only world power in the world is the United States, but the people are the ones who can threaten that establishment. And that's the reason why they go so far to keep us divided, to keep us sick,
yeah.
illiterate, and keep us always wanting and keep us an enemy to ourselves. And my message is to basically not endorse these people anymore with your votes or your money, and basically, endorse a new government, a new world for all of us.
Right. Right. Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, and it does speak to the power and the responsibility, I would say, that American citizens have, being on the front line of liberty in many ways. What does that look like, though? Pushing back against that, as citizens, at the micro level or at the macro level, whether it's on a day to day basis or going over the next year and a half until our next election here. I mean, I'm looking at how the libertarians have done in New Hampshire makes me a bit hopeful. Honestly, the infighting in the GOP makes me hopeful. I think that has to happen to a certain degree. Uh, yeah, I mean, do you have any hope? Because, or are you one of those people that is completely unregistered to vote and is, I don't know what else to describe it, because I have a friend like this, but it kind of seems like they're biding their time until the blue helmets come, and I don't know, maybe it's because he's retired, or but yeah, what are your thoughts?
Your worries are warranted, by the way, but you're asking hope from a hopeless pessimist. But here's my hopeful message for you and for anybody that's watching: is that the only way we can actually threaten this establishment, a powerful establishment, is basically not to mass protest. Mass protest could lead to an invasion of the singular unit by whether it's the FBI, whether it's like local or state law enforcement working on behalf of the state indirectly or directly. But one thing is for certain: if you want to threaten the establishment, smaller protests involved in every state. Now, you mentioned New Hampshire, for example, which is basically given me a lot of hope as well. I went to thankful. I'm very thankful to Eric Jackman of Jackman Radio and Reed Coverdale, the naturalist capitalist. They invited me to go with them to see a Ron Paul lecture in Washington D.C. I'm sorry, Virginia, And basically, I went just to see. I wanted to see for myself if it was really worth trying to, basically supplant the message of the libertarian movement. And what I saw really gave me promise. I saw a lot of young, and I saw a lot of old. So I saw a
Mm,
lot of demographics too, and that basically said to me that, hey, the message of anti-war really does resonate with the young and old, with black and white, with Jew and Gentile, everybody from every demographic, because the essence of humanity is involved. And so that gave me a little bit of hope. And so what I can basically say is the following, is that if everybody like basically went along with the New Hampshire model and basically wanted to kick out the federal government and secede from federal institution, not local and state governments. I think we could basically persuade those in the future. But as for the top establishment, there's no persuading. Why would they want to give up their power? The Marquis de Sade, the French author, basically wrote that the human dominion is the most intoxicating power of all, much more than the auspices of sex and money. So when you look at it from a psychological angle of what the federal government has done, they are drunk with power. They're drunk with apathy. That's the lack of empathy, the lack of love, for example. So they don't have anything to do with us, not on the psychological level or no more on the superficial level. So they don't have any commonality with us, the public. And so what can we do about it? Well, we can basically take back the power that we give them through our vote, through our money, through our support. If you just finally ripped that proverbial IV out of our arm and basically said, I'm not playing this game of anymore of arguing over simple semantics of religion and race and politics. That basically all it does is basically keep us divided and afraid of each other. We're not the enemy here. We are the people that basically instituted and gave a certain amount of people power over us to basically in the hopes of governing us on an honest and humane level, and that's failed. Basically, it's been a failure for over 100 years. But to keep it recent, we need to take back that power. That power belongs to us. They basically will tell you that, oh, the government is basically looking out for your best interests, and we're in charge of governing you. Well, no, not technically. We are the ones that gave you the institution of power, and we can take it back whenever we want. And so,
right.
unless the people get out of this, fractured, divisive, polarizing mindset, well, yeah, I think the future is bleak. But if we could have enough people like yourself there, Addy ads, and we have more people like Reed Coverdale and Clint Russell and other people in the libertarian sphere, Patrick McFarlane, Scott Horton, Connor Freeman, if we can get a lot more people like you guys, and yeah, I'll get behind that fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Wow. Yeah. I hope to see it, develop more over the next year and a half or so, because it does seem like we are still in a political bull market, so to speak. Uh, albeit if it's not one that is
Mhm.
financially correlated, right? But uh, yeah, very, very, very fascinating stuff. What's been the biggest surprise for you recently, Adam?
You know what? The biggest surprise has been the most least reported of all. And I thought that at the time when it was finally released to the public, it would garner some attention. It has not. In fact, it's been Executive Order 14040, which was released in September of 2021 under the Biden administration. And it's material relating to an FBI investigation into Saudi financing of certain 9/11 hijackers called Operation Encore. And when they released these files, and by the way, I initially said it was 5,000 files. It's approximately 18,000 pages. And I'm still currently reading them. I'm about three-quarters of the way. So
Wow.
basically, what they related in these files is enormous, and it's always something that people like Ryan Dawson and DJ Thermal Detonator, Robbie Martin, Abby Martin have basically alluded to over the years, but they didn't have concrete evidence that there were Saudi operatives inside the United States that were given money and logistics to some of the 9/11 hijackers in California. And now it's true with the latest revelations. And this comes at the heel, by the way, ironically, when Biden visited Saudi Arabia and asked Crown Prince bin Salman, the Crown Prince, who
Mm.
basically is going to be the king soon, because King Salman is indisposed, but he's technically the king. But basically, to produce more oil for the United States, and basically bin Salman said no. And so when Biden got back to the United States, these files just came out in time. So basically, what it says to me is that look, at the United States will basically have information that basically the public needs in regards to the civil suit against Saudi Arabia, which is still ongoing, but they haven't been fruitful and beneficial to them. And that, what does that tell you? That the United States government is basically not forthcoming in giving information or giving evidence of Saudi complicity, much less Israeli intelligence services that were here as well. And by the way, are we going to alienate our only allies in the region? Heck no. Basically, that's the reason why you don't hear much of Israel and Saudi Arabia regarding 9/11. And basically, yeah, we do have certain instances of Saudi complicity with 9/11, but that's not the whole story. But it is part of the story. And it does benefit the victims' families and their law firms like Creedler and
Mm.
Motley Rice to have this information, and it comes a little bit too late. Nevertheless, it just goes to show you that the government had this information for the past 19 years and wasn't very privy on handing this information because it hurts our interests regarding oil production and regulating the oil market in the Middle East. So when this came out, I ran right to the computer. In fact, a small local publication called the New Jersey North New Jersey.com reported on this story. You would think
Wow.
that this revelation is all over the news. Huge news. It really is tremendous news. But no,
It's
nobody
amazing.
really
Yeah.
covered it. Two
No.
weeks later, 3 weeks later, CBS did, ABC did, but only for a short time, and basically, just forgot about it altogether. But I've made a couple of videos and showing you the documents I shared on the screen, showing you that, hey, look, now we have evidence the Saudi Arabian operatives were inside the United States. And I've always said, if you could get to Saudi Arabia, you can get to Israel. And if we can get that, then you have the axis of evil, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, involving pre-intelligence information that could have stopped 9/11 altogether. And that's not me basically speculating. That comes from people like Thomas Drake, the former senior executive of the
Yeah.
NSA, who said, hey, by the way, the NSA had so much data, they probably, if shared with the FBI or the White House, could have stopped 9/11 altogether because they had so much information on these hijackers in the year 1999, 2000, and even going way before that. Basically, if we acted on it, 9/11 wouldn't have happened. So, is this a charge against the whole federal government? Is this against a charge against, Saudi Arabia or Israel for that matter? No, but there are elements within that government, within the intelligence services, that have to answer on why they could have stopped 9/11 and did not. And we haven't had
Mm.
those answers. So I've been working on that itself.
Mm.
But like I basically put out a video every day. It's not hard to do a 7-minute video. I'm primitive. I'm 53, so I still use Movie Maker, by the way.
Oh,
Like
nice.
one of the very
That's what
few
I
people that
started on.
do. So, yeah, like other people have like OBS and I had
Premiere.
Adobe Pro at one
Yeah.
time, but I just used Movie Maker because I want to do a video every day, real quick.
Mhm.
Something very informative. That basically can be seen by people. But that's what I've been working on. I've been trying to. I did an article, and by the way, I did want to mention this when you messaged me on my phone. I wanted to make a
Yeah.
quick mention. Today is the 30th anniversary of the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993, and a lot of people don't realize it.
Oh, wow.
And one of the very few people that gave me that reminder was DJ Thermodetonator, who's a 9/11 documentary filmmaker. He basically put out a post saying it's 30. I said, "Oh my God, I totally forgot about this." And basically, I did my longest article to date. I post on Medium, and it took me 3 months to write. And it basically is approximately about 100-minute read, and it basically entails the 1993 World Trade Center bombing before and on the day itself. And it's the longest article I've ever written to date. And I published that about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. But I published it today just to have a reminder, and and also to promote a podcast that basically came out today. Friends of mine, Sean Russell and Dan Harvey, they created their first podcast episode beyond Ground Zero, and it basically talks about the 9/3 World Trade Center bombing itself. So I just want to mention that. But yeah, I've been working on various topics and stuff, trying to keep relevant. To the time, not to keep dwelling on 9/11. Even though that's my focus of investigation. But I do tend to talk about the latest news and what's happening because it's important to talk about what's going on. It's because it's affecting a lot of people. I basically talk about geopolitics involving either Ukraine or Iran or China, and basically talk about those issues. But if you want to expand more on those, go to antiwar.com. Go to conflicts of interest. Those guys are the best in the country. Dave DeCamp, Kyle Anzalone, Connor Freeman, Will Porter, Scott Horton. The list goes on, and those are the best reporters in the country. And I speak very highly because they deserve it.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Adam. I'll definitely check those guys out. And we are have our last couple minutes here. Where can people find you and support you? And I do want to say that development and release of those documents related to 9/11 is something that I definitely missed, and I would love to look into that more. 18,000 pages, though, that's a lot. Is that on Scribd? You find that, or was
I'll
that?
share I'll share with you on Twitter in your message. I'll give you the entire cache. It was released on the FBI.gov website.
Okay, FBI. Okay, excellent. Okay, yeah, I'd really appreciate that, Adam. And those people you mentioned too, I want to reach out to them for a chat. But yourself, Adam, where can people find you, and how can they support you?
Oh, listen, just watching these videos that Addy Ads does supports me, and I'm very easy to find. That's my real name. If you Google Adam Fitzgerald 9/11, everything pops up. Or if you want to, cut it to a short chase, on my Twitter account, I have a pinned tweet where you can find all the links regarding my websites. The Darkened Hour is the podcast I co-host for Richard Cox. I have a YouTube channel that's always growing. I think right now I'm up to 3,000 videos and 50 playlists approximately. I do a video or two every single day talking about current topics or 9/11 itself or related to 9/11. And of course, I'm on Odyssey as a backup channel because, YouTube is always being restrictive. You never know when you're going to get a strike if you talk about, certain individuals. And I won't mention a Middle East country that has a lot of power in between. And I don't want to get you in trouble. So yeah, that you can find me very easily. I'm not hard to find.
Okay, okay, excellent. Thank you, Adam. And all those links will be included in the show notes and the description as well. I'm curious, or I want to figure out how you're still on YouTube, Adam, because is that? I mean, have you had lost any accounts? La-
Almost. Just
Almost.
now that you bring this up, I did have two strikes once, and it was basically talking about COVID, and it was a pro or con
Oh,
video, and I didn't mention anything about misinformation. It was about the vaccine cards. I got a strike.
wow, that's amazing.
The Department of Defense released the vaccine cards 2 years ago, and then when I mentioned about it, I got a strike for that. I also got a strike because I was critical of certain 9/11 pundits that talk about like no planes stuff like that. I got a strike for that. I had two strikes once, so
Wow.
I'm
Okay.
very careful about what I mention, and I also am very careful about what I put as a title because what I found out from
Hmm.
another person on YouTube was that if you mention a certain word in the description or in the title, you could get a strike for either misinformation or bullying. And I did not know that. I thought that they heard about certain words, but no, it's impossible because there's so many millions of videos being made daily on YouTube. What they do is they put your videos to a mass algorithm reporting database, and if they have words that basically are on like that warning label about misinformation or bullying or harassment, you don't get a warning. You get that
Right.
one warning initially. You get a strike, and it's very hard to appeal it. So
Right.
I've been very careful about what I post from now on.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Adam. And Leah, let's do this again soon, sir.
Oh
And
no, thank you for having me in the first place.
Yeah, of course, anytime, anytime. And thanks to the audience for tuning in. Please support me if you can. I need the help. Buymeacoffee.com/addy ads. Stay frosty, folks, and we will see everybody next time. The independent media and journalism you can trust is running on fumes. As a result of technocratic censorship, the tragedy is that hardworking independent journalists who have ethics and integrity are considering leaving the field of journalism. For as little as 3 cents a day, you can support my independent journalism media career at buymeacoffee.com/addyads. Thank you.